Nintendo teamed up with Sony to make the Super Nintendo add-on, and that eventually turned into the PlayStation. Well, the prototype was that earlier this year or last year it was found? We did a couple of stories on it,
I believe.
and so they took it to what was it? The retro gaming show in was it Hong Kong or China?
Kong.
It was Hong Kong. It was Hong Kong, and they tested it. It always turned on before. It was always a CD drive didn't work on this. It plays Super Famicom games, and it plays CD games in theory, and the Super Famicom game basically enables the CD drive to be accessed.
Right.
That's basically just similar to the Hue card on a TurboGrafx 16. It basically adds a little bit of RAM, whatever, and you can access it.
Yeah, as evidence in what we're going to discuss,
So,
it shows that it is expansion RAM.
So apparently the individuals that found this, it was the son and his father who ended up getting this, I think, in like an auction for a very low price from where he used to work, like boxes of stuff, and he got it with a bunch of other
And then they
stuff.
found it years later in an attic.
So they brought it there, it worked. Apparently somehow it stopped working when they brought it back here recently. So they brought it to Ben Heck of the Ben Heck Show, who is he's a great like engineer, electrician guy. He mods stuff. They did the giant Game Boy.
Makes all sorts of cool shit.
Really cool show. Every once in a while something like this comes on where it's like, wow, this is going to be cool. So they did a teardown of the Nintendo PlayStation prototype, a 26-minute video, like really going through all the nuts and bolts, analyzing all the chips on the motherboard and comparing it to the Super Nintendo. And it was a cool educational lesson. I'm not going to remember all right now, but the highlights are basically...
It's a Super Nintendo.
It's a Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Which we kind of figured.
Yep.
It's a Super Nintendo. That's first and foremost. Secondly, they figured out the power of the CD-ROM drive in terms of the processor there, the speed. And it turns out it was a double-speed CD-ROM drive, which is for the time, fairly fast and fairly impressive, because we were still dealing early 90s with single...
Sega CD was a single ROM drive. PC Engine Turbo Duo was a single-speed CD-ROM drive. And
getting a dual speed in like when it was made, 92, 93, that was expensive to buy a dual speed CD-ROM in like 92.
Yeah.
That was still really expensive. But they didn't come down probably till at least a couple more years, like I would say 93, 94. And they're still like $300 then. So this is going to be expensive. We do know that. This was going to come out. This was not going to be cheap probably, partially because of that. But it had less RAM. 256 kilobytes of expandable RAM versus 512 on a Sega CD. Overall, when you factor in audio RAM and everything else, video RAM, about half the RAM of a Sega CD.
Yeah, half the operating RAM of a Sega CD. And then on top of that, the double-speed CD-ROM drive with its 8-bit bus, it's unlikely that they really would have been able to take advantage of the double-speed CD-ROM drive.
So basically what the speed of the CD-ROM is how quickly can it read data. So you can read the data quicker, but then can you use the data?
Can you transfer the data?
Can you
move
transfer
the data around in any meaningful way that would actually make this
same with the computer. Your computer has a processor and it has RAM.
Right.
The RAM is how much information you can use at one time. So if this had less RAM, great, you're feeding me information, I can't spit it out.
Yeah. So
it's useless to me. It's still going to be slow, which means that loading times would be slow still. So then what are you getting out of it then? Access times, I mean... so that was just interesting to finally discover that. Then again, this might have been a final version anyway. It's obviously a prototype, so maybe they would have added it later. We have no idea.
It was interesting they brought up that for a machine-tooled case like that, it had to have been pretty close to what they had envisioned as a final model. However, when they took it apart, they did see some wires jumped around, and things were obviously still in prototype stage. What I thought was interesting was kind of his final assessment of it, and that was... Quite frankly, when you look at the specs of it, you look at the Sega CD and you look at how that was doing necessarily and how that was performing, this very well could have been squashed because it just wouldn't have added anything of any real merit or use.
No real value, especially if they figured, hey, we got to sell these for like $250 maybe. I'm just guessing. And then who's going to buy it? And who's going to make games for this? Maybe they figured this was going to be a bad idea.
Yeah, Because I mean, they
Similar
showed,
to the 64 N64 disk drive.
yeah, I mean, it was shown that basically with what this was providing, you would not have necessarily received stuff that would have been a whole lot better than what you were getting on the Super Nintendo.
Because they'd have to charge at least a Super Nintendo and then mark it up above that for the disk drive.
Because
as well.
like you said, at that point, those would have been incredibly expensive.
Yeah, because the Super Nintendo was still, we're talking 92. Super Nintendo was still $200 retail for the full one. Adding a CD-ROM drive back then, you're talking, and they're gonna make a profit on it. $400 more. I think about this thing would have cost easily in $92 or $93.
Right.
They wouldn't sold any of them. You know, the reason the Sega CD sold, and the Sega CD sold a decent amount, but not a huge amount. I think because there was enough time lapse in between the Genesis and
yes,
Sega CD.
it was. There was a moment. There was a long enough distance between the Genesis and the Sega CD to make it feel like it was a true upgrade, as opposed to
Like
here's
3.5,
a system.
4 years, yeah.
Now automatically here's another system. Because if this was 92, 93 that they were looking at, that's a year to 2 years.
Yeah, it's not.
I mean, that's not enough time to convince people of the value of this.
And again, that dual speed CD-ROM adds cost back then.
Yeah.
Now you laugh at that, but yeah, between 1 and 2 speed, that's cost. So they tried it, you know. So part 2 of this video is going to be Ben Heck restoring this back to life. Obviously, that'd be great if he does that. He probably can. I don't see a reason why he couldn't. It's a CD-ROM device. I mean,
yeah.
he can tinker with it, get little parts for it. I mean, hell, he probably had to. He can probably replace the CD-ROM, find a similar one, and pop it in. You'd think, you know, he'll figure this out.